Okay, day 3 of the Photoshop Happy Meal design project. I am starting every day I tend to kind of start back from scratch to kind of repeat information to kind of help you remember it. So remember, once again, when you start off with a brand new template, the first thing you want to do is what to this layer, folks? Yeah, you want to duplicate this layer. All right. So go up to this little menu right here in your layers palette menu, floating thing, whatever you call it. Go to duplicate layer right there. Now watch what happens to the layer stack down here. That name is fine with me. Hit OK. Now I have 2 copies in my stack. I can now turn off the first layer here at the bottom and save it in case it's needed later, in case I screw up royally and I need to restart. I can go back and get a fresh, untouched version of that layer. Remember, this background copy now is only to be used for making selections on my faces. It is not meant for me to actually put anything on that layer. All right, whenever I select something, like if I take the magic wand and select these faces, before I do anything, I'm going to want to make a new layer right down here at this button. It's a hard habit to get into at first, but once you get used to it, it gets much easier. Just switch back to make the selection and switch back up to your other layer to actually fill or stroke or do whatever you want to do. All right, so first thing we're going to talk about is the pen tool real quick. That's the next one down here. I won't spend too much time on it, but basically what the pen tool does is it creates a series of points and creates what's called a path. And a path in Photoshop can be used for several different things, but the main thing is to you can draw shapes with them. And these paths are created, you click and make one point. Then anywhere else on your box, you click and make another point, and you see that it is immediately connected by a line. Now I am still holding down the left mouse button. If I drag it, you see how those anchor points start to form like a Bezier curve kind of a thing. And I can adjust the angle of the curve. And I can keep going and making, all kinds of twisty shapes. If I go all the way back to where I started and close the path, now I can take this shape and I can fill it. I can align text to go around the outside of it. All right. But what this shape, the difference between this type of a shape and a shape with the marquee tool is that this is created using what's called a vector. A vector basically just means that no matter how big or small you make it, it will retain its integrity. We talked on day 1 about image resolution and how if the higher the resolution of your image, the smoother it looks. But if your resolution is really low, like anything below 300 DPI, it starts to look chunky, especially once you get down to like those 72 DPI kind of things. A vector image will never degrade. Whether you print it out the size of a business card or whether you blow it up on a billboard, it will always have a very smooth edge to it, which is why a lot of graphic designers use vector images in their work. Adobe makes another product called Illustrator that uses nothing but vectors. I don't use them very much because they're very complicated. They're really involved. You have all these little points and curves that you have to control, and it takes practice. So that's not something that I want you guys to have to deal with at this beginning level, so we don't really deal with it. But that's in essence what it does. So let me quickly just show you. If I right click on this path that I've created, you see these different options you can select: fill path, stroke path, etc. I can hit fill path, and it'll work very similar to a selection. I can just go OK, and see what it did. It filled in that path with a foreground color. And now I can take this and move it around. If I right click, I'm sorry, go to the direct selection tool or path selection tool, which is just below this, I can actually click on this path and move it around and then fill it and do what I want to do with it. All right, if I want to actually select the shape itself, I just get the move tool. But I can't move a path with the move tool. I've got to get the direct selection tool. If I want to add more points on my path, I simply click at the add anchor point tool. Remember, this is a pull-out menu, and I can add more points, as many as I want, if I want more control over my shape. And we'll get more to the text part of this in a minute. So anyway, in a nutshell, that is the pen tool. Use it to make paths. You can fill and stroke a path. You can outline it. Let me go ahead and outline this real quick just to show you. Right click again. Hit stroke path this time. You can choose which tool you want to use with it. I'll select the pencil. Hit OK. It's really thick. That's why it did that. Let me undo this. I might need to go back and I'm not sure how that did that. I might need to go back under stroke and change the size of it. Yeah, 50 pixels. Let's change it to 10 pixels and try it one more time. And okay, still didn't do it. Not that important. If you want to delete your path, just simply select it with the direct selection tool. And hit delete and it goes away. All right. Now the big one, the text tool right here. It's the letter T. All right. You're going to use this one a lot on this assignment. All right. The text tool, when selected, allows you to not only create fields of text, any size, any color, any style, but it also allows you to warp that text. So you could make text that's like curved or, any arrangement you want. You can align it vertically, horizontally, whatever. It's pretty cool. Your boxes really start to look more professional once you start getting text on there. All right, so to create just you know what? Before I get too much into this, I'm going to go back and I'm going to select and fill my box faces just so that I have something other than white to look at. I'm going to fill it with a gradient, a red and yellow. Okay. So the text tool. Anytime you click on the text tool, It should default to horizontal. That's, what you want. If it doesn't for some reason, make sure you do that. Now, you want to click and drag to create a text field, just like this. Okay? It's going to look a lot like the marquee tool. And then just let go. All right? Once you have done that, you can always adjust the shape of the field after the fact. So it doesn't really matter if you get it right. Just get something in there. Now you want to type inside this box. Up here at the top on the options bar, you'll see that all these things have switched to text-centric types of options. So you've got this window here, which allows you to select your font style. And as you can see, there's a lot of different options. Now, Photoshop comes preloaded with a bunch of fonts already. However, you can also download fonts and install them on your computer, and Photoshop should recognize them if they're TrueType or open, so whatever. In my case, I actually have some fonts that I have bought and installed. So I have cool fonts like this that look like comic book lettering that I have because I bought them. All right, here you can change the font style, whether it's like regular or bold, if it's available. Right here is the font size. You can either select a pre-made point size, or you can just type in whatever value you want. This window lets you choose sharp, crisp, strong, etc. I usually just leave it at the default. These three buttons control the alignment of text, whether it's aligned left, center, or right. This box here controls my font color. So I can go in, if I click on this, it will actually bring up the color picker. And I can choose the color. These other ones we'll get to in a minute. All right, let me zoom in. Not mean to create that layer. Okay, I'll delete this one too. Let's start over. All right, click and drag. All right, I've got 140 points. That's a lot. Let me just take this down to maybe 30 points. Now, all right, so you can see it's starting to only put the type in within the boundaries of this text field. Right now I have my type set to align right. If I want it to align center, I select it, and then I can center it this way. The text more or less will adapt itself. Like if my text box is too small, it'll get cropped off. So you might have a case where you either need to readjust the shape of the size of your text field, or just make your text smaller. As long as I have this text field open, I can edit my text, but I need to drag select it to change it. So if I click here and drag, I can go back in and change the color. Instead of black, I can go blue, right? And it updates it, or green. I can also update the style. I can change it from this to, you can sort of see it changing. All right. So The other thing that type can do, as I mentioned a second ago, if you go to this button here, you can warp text. If I click on this button and change the style from none to like arc or wave, and then you can use these sliders like the bend modifier, distortion modifiers. You know, you don't want to warp it too much because then it affects the readability of it. That's arch. You can do wave. So you can kind of do some cool stuff. Like if I was doing, let's say, a Finding Nemo box, I would use this wave tool maybe to make the text look like it's underwater or something, right? So that's the text tool in a nutshell. There's other ones you can do, you know, inflate. You really just kind of have to experiment. And see what comes up. So anyway, there's that. The other thing that you can do with type, or really with any layer, is you can add other effects to it. So let's say I've got this the way I want it. So I click off the type tool, and now I just move it around. If I decide later on that I need to go back and fix this again and edit it, I reselect the text tool and I click anywhere on the text. Don't do it off to the side or it will create a new text layer. Click right on the text and the text field will reactivate, and then I can drag and edit whatever I need to. If I'm ready to stop working on the text, I just click off of it, go to the move tool, and move it around. Now, this is a good time to mention adjustment layers and layer style. Okay. If you, let's say I've got this text here and I want to add an outline around it, a stroke around it. I could try to select the letters and go edit stroke and do it that way, but that's really kind of a pain. A stroke is only good when you've got like shapes and stuff. Another way to do that is if you double click on the layer, not on the text part, but off to the side, double click, and layer style will pop up. And you will see all these different options: bevel, emboss, contour, texture, stroke, etc. If I check stroke, you see what it does there? It automatically puts an outline around all of my letters. Over here, I can control the blend mode, the opacity, etc. If I double click on the word stroke, it takes me to the controls. And I can change the color of the stroke if I want it from white to go from white to, I don't know, blue. I can do that. I can also change the size of the stroke. I can make it smaller, thicker. I can make it go from the outside of the letters to the inside of the letters to the center. I think outside looks best. Bring the opacity of that down a little. And I can change, again, you know, anything that I need, the size, whatever. All right, and other effects work really well with this. Instead of a stroke, I could do a glow. Outer glow works really well. And that gives it kind of a soft, sort of a, you know, effect. I can make it softer, I can make it sharper, or more faded. So using layer style, especially with text, this works with images too, but using this with text makes your work look a lot more professional. I wouldn't overuse it, but just doing a few simple strokes and glows and things, and bevel and boss is good too. I'll show you that one. Let's undo check. Bevel and boss basically makes things look like it's 3D. See that? And you can change the direction of the light source by clicking this little wheel here. So if the light source goes from right to left, up or down, and then just sort of change, you can change the size, you can soften or make it look crisper. You can change it from an outer bevel to an inner bevel, so it looks like just the letters are beveled. So you just need to like open yourself up to doing some experimenting with this, but that's a really important thing that will help you, especially when you're using text. So that's why I showed it to you now. But again, it works with images as well. All right, so I like the outer bevel better, so I'm going to leave it on that. All right, any questions about the text tool for those of you that are actually paying attention and not doing homework or sleeping or whatever? Yes, I can tell if you're not paying attention. All right, moving on then. Direct selection and path selection tools, we kind of already went over those. The next tool on the toolbar is the line tool, and it's bundled with these other shape tools. These make shapes that are they basically work like paths. So let's do a shape, a custom shape, and I can show you how that works. All right. As usual, once you change the tool over here, the options change up here on the option bar. Right now I have a heart selected, but as you can see, it comes with lots of preset shapes. You can make your own with the pen tool, or some of these already do this. Word balloons and etc. But these are going to work, these are vector-based shapes. All right. So when you click on them, and then click and drag, the properties come up, and then you can change, if you want to change the stroke or make it smaller, you can do that. You can either keep the outline or get rid of it. Path operations just has to do with whether or not you're combining things or making them isolated in terms of if you have more than one shape going on in your scene. Now, let me go back to the type tool and watch what happens. If I click on the shape and start typing, it will actually wrap itself along the shape. So if I do, let's say, a path, and things are, doing like a windy kind of a curvy line, I can take the type tool and click on that path, and the text will follow, which could be kind of cool. So if you want to do something like that, you would use either a path or a shape. All right, and again, there's rectangles, polygons, or you can make your own with the pen tool. All right. The hand tool. This is basically just a navigation tool. You can use it to pan across your image, like so. That's all it's there for. Just so you can, if you're zoomed in really close and you want to get to another part of your image, and you don't want to use these little bars on the side, these scroll bars, you can just use the hand tool to scroll across. All right, finally, the zoom tool, which just looks like a little magnifying glass. This does what you think it does. It zooms in closer. If you don't want to zoom in that close and you want to zoom out instead, hold down the Alt key and you see the little plus inside turns to a minus, and you can go back out. Now, personally, I don't really use this tool. I just use Control Alt and then plus or minus, and that does it for me. And it's a little easier than having to switch to a different tool, but that's just me. All right, so that's it for the toolbar in terms of briefly showing you what each one does. Now we're going to go back up here and show you some of these other function menu things, because there's some of these that you really need to know. There's a lot here, but you only need to probably know like not even a third of it. So it's important to know what to skip and what not to skip. All right, we have gone over the basic file stuff. We've done a few things under edit. We talked about step forward, step backward, and undo. We've talked about fills and strokes, and we've talked a little bit about transforming, scaling and rotating, etc. One thing we haven't talked about yet is a paste special. Now, let's say you want to put something in your background that's not just a gradient or a flat color. Like you have a photo of the ocean or something, or outer space, and you want to put other things on top of it. You could go and search for one of those images. Let me turn some of these layers off, so I've got room to work here. Okay. I could go, I mean, I've already got an image saved, so I'll just use that. But let's say I go to the Google or whatever, or I use a scanner, and I find this picture. And I'm going to put other stuff on top of it, but I just want to get this on one side of my box. I could do Control A to select all, then Control C to copy. Then go back over here to my template. Control V to paste. There it is. Now, if I try to scale this up as is, edit, transform, scale. I mean, I can try to get this to fit within the boundaries, but it's really difficult. And I'm going to have to go back and try to erase the parts that are hanging off the sides. It's not the most ideal way of doing it. I mean, I could take the opacity of the layer, bring it down to where I can see through it. I could get the polygonal lasso. I mean, I could do it this way, but you see how convoluted it is. And if I decide after I do all this that I want to move it around or resize it, I can't because I've already cut it up. So the alternative to doing it this way is to do something called a paste special. All right, let me go ahead and trash that layer. Here's how you do a paste special. The first thing you do is over here on your template layer, go down to your background copy, like you're supposed to do. Get the magic wand tool, select the area you want to paste right there. Now go back to the image that you're pasting and copy it. Control A, select all, Control C to copy onto the clipboard. So now my Spider-Man image is on the clipboard ready to go. Now instead of simply pasting, I go up to Edit, Edit, Paste Special, Paste Into. It's not showing up because that layer is underneath. There it is. Now it doesn't look like it did anything. But watch what happens when I go to scale it. It looks like it just pasted it in the center like normal. But if I move this around, see what it's doing? It actually created what's called a mask layer. Now whenever I move it outside of here, it won't go outside the confines of this. So if I scale it up, it's going to allow me to stay within the boundaries. I can hit enter and kind of move this around to where I want it. Now that's not a great image. It's not an image I would use, but this just shows you how it works. This tool is really handy, but this also gets people into trouble. And this goes back to what I talked about on Monday about stealing. All right? If this was your box and you just took this image right here and slapped it on the side and put a logo on it, that's not designing. Okay? You didn't design any of this stuff. You didn't come up with the colors. This is not your image. You're just using someone else's image. So yes, at a glance, that looks pretty cool, but you didn't design it. Now, if you had gotten all these elements separately and found a Spider-Man figure, found some cool buildings and some water and some sky, put them all together yourself, then even though those individual assets were not generated by you, you're still recombining them in a way that is your own idea. Does that make sense? So I know on this assignment, you're going to be working with stuff that maybe is beyond your skill level in terms of being able to like draw your own cool Spider-Man or whatever it is. But there's still a way to use other assets that weren't drawn by you and find an inventive way of arranging them, scaling them, combining them, and making decisions about the design and placement of things to make it your own. That's what I want you to do. If you are just slapping stuff on here that's already been designed by someone else, that's got all the effects on it and all the, everything else, that's not what we're doing. You're not going to learn from that. And I can tell from looking at your stacks whether or not you did that. And it will affect your grade quite a bit. So just be careful when you're using images like this. Like, again, let's say you're doing like Scooby-Doo, okay? And you want to do a side of your box where you have like, all this stuff like a haunted house and a spooky looking tree and the characters there. All right. If you found all those individual elements from other places and were able to arrange them and put them together, that's awesome. That's what I want. But if you just find an image that already has all that on there and just stick it on there, where's the challenge in that? Anyway, I don't know how else to explain it. I hope I'm making myself clear on that. So just don't go overboard and take this too far and start stealing stuff, because that's not what we're doing. All right. So that's Paste Special. Everything else is the same, fill, stroke. Content aware is when you're filling something and it's going to use the surrounding pixels to try to patch up a little bit that's not right, but you won't need to worry about that. We've gone over transformations, scale, rotate, skew, perspective, warp, rotate, flip. All right. And that's pretty much all you need to know from this edit toolbar. Now, image. We've done a little bit of this, but we're going to do a little bit more real quick. Image mode. Every time you work with an image in Photoshop, it's going to be one of several things. What you want, the main default mode that you want is RGB color. So if you go in and let's say you bring in an image from Google or something and is black and white, go and check the mode and make sure it's not a grayscale image. And if it is, switch it to RGB. Or sometimes it'll be indexed color and you'll switch it to RGB. All right. So just know RGB color is the mode that you want if for some reason it's not. That's all I got to know about that. Image size, we've gone over that a little bit. That tells you the dimensions and resolution of your current image. Right now, your box is a decent size. It's at 51.4 megs right now. It's 11.753 by 17. That's the print dimension. So if you were to print it, that's what it would come out. You would need a piece of paper that big. The resolution has to do with how many pixels per square inch it is. A pixel is just a little unit of measurement. If I zoom in really close, you could see the individual pixels in the image. The more pixels you have per inch, the smoother looking the image will be. All right. But the more memory it will take up. So right now my resolution is at 300. That's about the bare minimum of what you should have to have a decent looking image. Anything lower than that, things start looking really chunky. Anything higher than that will look good, but it'll be more memory intensive. Now, you can always take a low-res image, a high-res image, and scale it lower. So whenever you're scanning something in, you always want to make sure it's really high-res, because it's easy to take something like, let's say, 1,000 DPI, and then bring it in and make it smaller in Photoshop, decrease the resolution. That won't affect the quality that much. But what you can't do is take something that's low res and try to make it higher. It'll just look blurry and weird. All right, so it doesn't work both ways. So whenever, the reason why this is relevant is that when you are going and looking for images off the internet, try to find images that are high res. If I go to, say, Google, and I'm looking up resource images, what I want to do is look at how big this is. I can right click on this and go to view image info, or sometimes it's properties. That's not really going to tell me what I want. Go to general. Sometimes it tells you the resolution. That's not doing it. All right. About 7 minutes left. So that's just a little bit about resolution. You can always go to image size and check the resolution of any image that you have and find out how big it is. And if it's really small, if it's 72 or lower, you don't want to blow it up very big on your box, is my point. Otherwise, it's going to look chunky. You want to make sure if you have something really large on your box, it's high enough res that it won't look choppy. All right, image rotation just rotates the entire file that you have. Canvas size refers to the amount of room on your file. So if you need to make your file a little bit bigger or smaller, not just the image, but the actual canvas size, that's what you use. Duplicate just makes a copy of your image. These other ones you don't need to worry about. All right, layer, we've already been over a lot of these. New layer, duplicate layer, delete layer. A lot of this stuff is repeated down here on this menu. So whether you access it from up here under layer or whether you access it from down here under layer, it's the same information. All right, but it just helps having more than one place to go. All right, layer style, that's what we showed you down here. You can either access that from here, or as I mentioned, you can double click on the layer and it'll also bring it up. But that's, you can access it there as well. A lot of this stuff, layer mask, vector mask, you don't need to really worry about that. Video layers, don't worry about it. Sometimes you will need to rasterize your image or your type if you want to make it an editable part of your image. So that's where that's located. And here's where you merge your layers, all right? So for example, let's say you have like 100 layers in your stack and it's too many and you want to pare them down. You can actually merge them down. Like right here, if you look at my stack, you'll see that actually gonna wait for me to do that. Okay. I've got layer 3 and layer 2 as separate layers. But if I go up here and do merge down, it's going to actually combine those two. Now they're layer 2 is and layer 3 have combined to one layer. All right. Merge visible just merges every layer on here that's turned on. So if you have several layers and you want to combine a bunch of them more than just one at a time, just click off with the little eyeball icon here. Click off the ones that you don't want merged, and it will only merge the ones that are turned on. And then flatten image flattens the whole thing. It puts every layer together on one layer. You don't really want to do that until you're totally done and you're saving it as a copy. You always, folks, you always want to save a layered version of your box, even when you're done. So that way, if you need to go back and make a change, it's easy to do. Once you have flattened an image, it's too late. You've lost your layers. You can't do anything about it. All right. Type, we've already done all the type stuff pretty much. Select, we've gone over a couple things on select. A lot of these are hotkeys. So select all just selects the entire image. Deselect does what it says, gets rid of the select. Select inverse is what I was telling you guys earlier. If you have, like, let's do a different one. Let's do Chick-fil-A logo. Let's say I want to bring the Chick-fil-A logo in to my Spider-Man box. All right. If I select the white and hold down Shift and click in here, and then I go to select. Right now it's got the background selected. If I go select inverse, that flips it so that now the foreground is selected. Now I can copy, Control C, and I can do Control V, and there is my Chick-fil-A. Oops, I forgot one. Delete that out. And now I can go to Edit, Transform, Scale, bring it down, do whatever. Move it on there, hit Enter. You get the idea. All right, I'm going to stop now because most of you aren't paying attention and haven't been for a while, so good luck with that when you have a question. And we will continue this tomorrow. We don't have much left. The only thing we really need to go over now are filters, which won't take too long, and a few other small odds and ends.